Everybody get out your sentence card when you came in. I hope you got a card when you came in. If not, if you'll just wave, hold your hand up, our ushers will make sure you get a sentence card. I want to tell you the why behind the sentence card. Revelation chapter 2 and chapter 3, Jesus speaking to the church says, if you want to overcome, you have to hear what the Spirit says. How many of you know the connected part of overcoming is to hear? You've got to open your ears and hear. How many of you know that assumes the necessity that God still speaks today? You believe that? You're not just coming to church to hear a preacher preach. You're coming to hear what heaven wants to say to you. Come on, do you believe that? This is what heaven wants to say to you. So I started praying about the church and took that scripture and I've applied it to my own life, and it does work. When you hear what God says and you obey what God says, life works. So it kind of came about this way, and I'll be very brief, but I do want you to know why we do these. I preached one of the best sermons I've ever preached in my life. You feel that right there? And I left on Sunday morning just feeling so great about it. I even told Rob, I said, that was one of my best ever. That was all, even like Jesus was clapping for me. It was like, when Jesus claps for your sermons. And so I was just so proud of that sermon. Well, Thursday afternoon, Pastor David and I were at Starbucks in line. He still drinks coffee. Pray for him. And we were in line at Starbucks, and I said, David, man, my sermon Sunday was incredible. He said, yeah, I know. I was out of town. I have to listen to it. He said, what was it about? And I said, well, it was about I couldn't even remember my own sermon. I was like, it was mind-blowing, but I couldn't even remember my own message. And I was sitting there thinking, oh, my God, I can't even remember what I preached on Sunday. I'm drinking too much Diet Coke or something. I don't know what's going on. But in that moment of time, sitting in the Starbucks parking lot, I remembered a sentence that said this. A gentleman touched me on the shoulder in 1990, and he said one phrase to me. He said, Mark, your journey is your destination. And he walked off. And it's been 25 years later, 26 now, and I still remember that one sentence, your journey is your destination. And God spoke to me and said to my heart, I want you to begin to craft a sentence from heaven for your church every week that they'll never forget, and that you'll hold on to it and you'll listen to it. So I came back to the office and I just began to pray. And so we are launching out the sentence card that you will get every week when you come, that is a sentence from heaven's heart to you. So this is not a sermon title. So I want you to kind of go ahead and say, this is not the title of my sermon. This is the sentence of heaven's breath to you. And if you will apply it to your life, you will overcome. Okay, let me go ahead since it's the new year. We are a Spirit-filled church, and I am a black man in a white man's body. So I don't know why God put me in a white man's body. But that means I need somebody to talk back to me. So I don't mind if you talk back to me. It makes me, even if you got to make it up, just make it. It makes me feel better. No preacher likes preaching to a dead room. So, thank you. Watch out, man. I'm getting wired up. The card today, and it's going to sting, says this, and I want you to look at it. Are you being selfish? Look at your neighbor and just ask them, are you being selfish? Just go ahead and ask them. Selfishness, I was praying about the church this year and was talking to Robin about all the things that I dealt with last year, and the problems that arose in church, the people I've talked with, my own personal life. And I began to pray about, well, how should we launch this year off? And I felt this phrase rise up in me about selfishness. Do you know it's impossible to have a good life if you're selfish? Selfishness is going to destroy everything you are and the dreams of your life. If you don't get a handle on it, it will ruin your marriage. It will ruin your children. It will ruin your job. It will ruin your integrity. It will ruin your testimony. It will strip from you everything you ever wanted and leave you dead with nothing. And the whole time, though, the lie of selfishness is, if you'll keep being selfish, you will get everything you want. while the deception of selfishness is, it is killing you in the process. Now, selfishness goes way back. It goes back to when you were in your mama's belly and she birthed you out and they spanked your behind. Selfishness kicked in. It is placed in you by God because you're an individual person and you have what is called the self. If you're a psychology major, you've studied the id, the ego, the superego, and all of those things that come along with the self. But self finds its basic problem this way. Before you're even old enough to talk, selfish behavior kicks in. If you don't know it, just go keep a little baby and hold the baby, and selfish behavior kicks in off of one thing: contentment or discontentment. If the baby is content, the house is happy. If the baby is discontent, the house is chaos. If you've never raised a discontented baby, try it. It brings chaos to the whole house. You can't watch TV with a discontented baby. The dogs leave the room and go elsewhere. Mom's pacing the floor back and forth. The way we dealt with discontented babies is we put them in the back of the car and drove them around town till they went to sleep. Discontentment. Lily was at our house staying with one of our daughters. We have 4 girls, and our youngest girl had a friend over, Lily, which is JJ's daughter, and we were riding down the road in the subdivision, and I started doing the car like this, swerving, so that the kids in the back were rocking back and forth, laughing, banging into each other. Yes, it was dangerous, but it was fun. And we were... Girls, don't try this at home, but try it in the street. So, I was making sure nothing was in the way, but I was swerving down the subdivision, banging them back and forth in the back seat. And then Lily says, "My daddy does this to try to keep the babies to stop crying." I thought, I've been there, done that. I've had a screaming baby in the back, and you're rocking them driving down the subdivision, holding the little baby's heads going back and forth. Discontentment. It is miserable. There's nothing better than a contented baby. But get a discontented one, and we're passing them back off to mother. As a matter of fact, somewhere today you may see a number come up on the screen that says parent of so-and-so is needed. That means the baby downstairs is discontent and needs something. So discontentment, I want you to understand this, selfishness is not necessarily a demonic thing. It is a biological need. Self-preservation is a biological need. It comes with the territory. We all want to self-preserve ourselves. Now, the issue of this button of self-preservation is handy to have. It just becomes wrong when that self-preservation, discontented, contented button begins to destroy everything in my life because I've never grown out of the phase to learn how to live my life when I'm discontented and I just want everybody to make me content. And so I remove the discontentment button and everybody has to push the contentment button and make me happy. That's great when you're 2 and 3, but by the time you hit 4, you become what we call a spoiled, rotten brat. And nobody wants to hang out with you and invite you to the party, and nobody wants you to come over because you need all of the attention and you need everybody to pay attention to you. Now, that's okay for a 4 and 5-year-old. We can discipline that. The problem is when it gets into the teenage years and we become selfish. And we want to do what we want to do and how we want to do it. And we're telling our parents we hate them and we're mad because they made us pick our clothes up. Or they made us come in before midnight. And then it treks on into adulthood if you've never dealt with it, and it ends up finding its way into marriage. And if you don't deal with it, you'll end up divorced. Every divorce that I've ever seen happen can be traced back to some type of selfish behavior. One of the two has gained hold of selfish behavior, and selfish behavior manifests in crazy ways. It manifests differently in all of us. Selfish behavior is, I will fight tooth and toenail for me to be content. Whether it hurts you or not, because I have no regard for you, because it's my environment of contentment that has the utmost priority. And when your environment around you of contentment holds the utmost of priority, you are, by nature and definition, a selfish person. Now, in this thing of selfishness, I wish I could say at age 50, it has left me. But it never does. Selfishness only leaves you when we bury you. And then when we're burying you, everybody else in the room is selfish. How you look, where you're going to be buried, who's going to get your piano, who's going to get your money and your clothes. You don't care. We do. We're still alive. So no matter how, I want you to just grab this, no matter how godly you get, selfishness will always be one step behind you, nipping your heels like a chihuahua. If you think that you can get godly enough for selfishness to leave you alone, you've already been deceived. And you've gotten into error and false doctrine. Because the moment you think your flesh is evil, you've believed a wrong doctrine. Flesh is not evil, or God wouldn't have given you flesh to live here on this planet. Flesh is a God-given thing. You have to have flesh to live here. So you got to have this skin to live here. So it's a godly thing. Emotions are godly. If you didn't have emotions, you couldn't love the Lord. But if the devil knows that flesh is needed to be on the planet and emotions are needed to know what love feels like, then he's going to play on the fact that the flesh that was given to you becomes selfish and the emotions that were given to you to know love become give me. And it becomes a battle that at age 50 I still fight it. I wish I didn't, but I do. I fight it in these ways. In the middle of a movie, the kids run in the room and start yakking. 2 days ago, right in the middle of a movie, I thought I could have killed her, but I was Christian, so I didn't. Right in the middle of a movie with my heels kicked up in my little spot in my chair that I always sit, smells like me, looks like me, little couch when I sit down says, welcome back. That's how... Anybody got a chair like that in your house? Okay, I'm just making sure. I got that little spot. It's my little cozy spot. It's my bubble of contentment. My feet on the coffee table that Robin hates, but it's there. She put the coffee table there. I used to scratch my bare foot on it because it had this nice little metal piece that felt so good. She turned the table around so I couldn't scratch. I know she did it. I never said anything to her, but I know she did it. She didn't do it. She specifically turned that little metal clip around so I couldn't scratch my bare foot on it anymore. I didn't say anything about her selfish behavior. Because now we're going to fight over selfishness. I like scratching my foot on that metal thing, and she doesn't like me to scratch my foot on her furniture. So here we go with who's going to win. Yeah, no, that'll never happen. No. She's godly, but she ain't Jesus. She's not touching my feet. She told me that already. I love you. I ain't touching those feet. So I was kicked back. I was watching a movie. Denzel Washington is one of my favorites. So I had me a Denzel Washington movie going on. And I was loving Denzel. And then Robin, this lady on the front row, the first lady on the front row, comes into the kitchen, comes in, clips the light on, and then anybody have a NutriBullet? It's a blender, but the different name, so you'll pay more for it. But it's a blender. Or it's a NutriBullet is a high-tech redneck blender. She starts NutriBulleting right in the middle of me watching. Right in the middle of me watching the movie. I'm like, what in God's name are you doing? It's the middle of the day. This is not NutriBullet time. She didn't even care. I just muted the TV. Now, I muted the TV to make a selfish statement because I've learned in 25 years the best way to be selfish is with your mouth closed. So I just muted it and just sat there with steam coming up the top of my head, hoping she would turn around and see that it's on pause, and I'm waiting on her to get done. Selfish behavior. I read my Bible every night, but I still find selfishness can creep in. I love Jesus with all my heart, but selfishness can still find its way in my hip pocket. I read the Bible and I find that even Jesus himself dealt with selfishness when he said, I wish I didn't have to go to the cross. I don't want to do this. If there's another way, let it be. See, selfishness is not always demonic. It's the fight for contentment. It's the fight for being content. And you got to learn how to deal with it. So I want to teach you this morning how to deal with selfishness from Nehemiah chapter 1. It's a crazy place to start, but it does lend itself to a story that I want to pull out on how to deal with selfish behavior at the start of the year, because it does affect everything around you. It affects your relationships. It affects your contentment level. And when I read, Paul says this in the New Testament, and I don't know how he got there. I tried to get there. He said, for I have learned the secret of being content. There must be a secret to it. Meaning it doesn't come naturally. I have learned the secret to being content, whether well-fed or hungry, in need, or this is Philippians 3, I believe. I can do all things through Christ, who strengthens me. I used to think all things through Christ meant I could go run a marathon. I could graduate the biology class I was flunking, and I would quote, I can do all things through Christ. Get me out of this class, God. I can do all things through Christ. Help me finish this pizza, Lord. But the older I get, I realize I can do all things through Christ is a shout to my selfish behavior. Because my selfish behavior is I want to do all things through me. Because if I step into the line of I want to do all things through Christ, it's going to cause me to have to die to myself. But if I do all things through me, I only do things that make me content. But the moment I bring Christ in, I filter in heaven, and I'll just like to say this to you. Sometimes when you obey heaven, it doesn't always leave you in a contented feeling place. Flesh is screaming. God won't pull through. You can't do this. I read this passage of Scripture. I want to tie it into selfishness out of Nehemiah 1, verse 1, and I will read all the way down through verse 6. Nehemiah 1, 1 through 6. These are the memoirs of Nehemiah, the son of Hakaliah, in the late autumn, in the month of Kislev, in the 20th year of King Artaxerxes' reign. I was in the fortress of Susa. He's minding his own business, in other words. Hanani, one of my brothers, came to visit me with other men who had just arrived from Judah, and I asked them about the Jews who had returned there from captivity and about how things were going in Jerusalem. And they said to me, things are not going well for those who return to the province of Judah. They are in great trouble and disgrace. The wall of Jerusalem has been torn down, and the gates have been destroyed by fire. Verse 4. When I heard this, I sat down and wept. In fact, for days I mourned, fasted, and prayed to the God of heaven. And I said, O Lord, God of heaven, the great and awesome God who keeps his covenant of unfailing love with those who love him and obey his commandments, listen to my prayer. Look down and see me praying night and day for your people Israel. I confess we've sinned against you. Yes, even my own family has sinned. When I read that over the Christmas break, my heart broke for myself. I was thinking about the future, doing life with you all and me as a shepherd of this house in 2016. I read this passage and my heart broke because it made me see something about Nehemiah in verse 4. After he heard of the tragic news of his brothers, he said, matter of fact, put verse 4 back up there. He said this, I wept, I mourned, and I fasted and I prayed. And God spoke to me that this is the antidote to selfish behavior. He didn't just say, I prayed for them. A selfish person can pray. He says, I wept, but a selfish person can weep. I've cried being selfish. He says, I wept, and in fact, for days I mourned. I've mourned. You can be miserable and mourn. When things don't go your way, you can mourn. When things don't go your way, you can weep. And when things don't go your way and you're discontented, you can pray. But I've learned the one thing you cannot do selfishly, and that's fast. Fasting breaks selfish behavior. Now, I'm not talking about a Daniel fast. I'm not talking about just eating green beans and clean food. I'm talking about when you shut your mouth off from food, selfish behavior will throw a nightmare of a fit. The moment you stop eating food, you will find out how quickly out of the background a selfish behavior will come. I need my coffee, I need my Coke, I need my food, I need my hamburger, I need my other cup of coffee. Oh my God, I've got to have my Starbucks, my head is pounding. I need my second Coke, I need my Diet Coke. Oh my God. The moment you say, I'm not going to eat, every billboard for Burger King will scream at you. I don't even eat Burger King. And I was fasting last year and rode past a Burger King sign, and I had a spiritual moment. I rode past and I saw that Whopper, and I thought, my God, that looks great. I don't even eat Burger King. I know it looks like I live there, but food. I learned something about Nehemiah that day, and it wasn't for you, it was for me, because I thought, I wonder if I've ever loved someone so much that I could go without food. Most of the time we go without food because of selfish behavior. I want my pants to fit. Even when you fast, it can easily be selfish because you look in the mirror and go, wow, I look better. My pants fit a little better. Even selfish behavior tries to come out because you think after the fast, I can wear the clothes I can't wear before the fast. Nothing wrong with that. But you just see how it begins to scream. And I asked myself a very hard question. Did I love people enough to miss food? It really doesn't mean much until you go back to the book of Genesis. If you'll turn to the book of Genesis chapter 3, and you will understand something about the book of Genesis chapter 3. In the book of Genesis chapter 3, the first sin of humanity was food. The first sin of humanity was not adultery, pornography. It was not alcoholism or crack cocaine. It was not even murder. The first sin of the Bible was eating food. There is something very supernatural connected to food. And I say it this way, there are 4 supernatural things you have to live. One is food. Stop it, you die. The next is water. Stop it, you die. The next is oxygen. Stop it, you die. The next is light. Stop light, everything dies. Right? That's Science 101. God made you so that to continue life, you have to eat, you have to drink, you have to have oxygen, and you have to have light to keep the cycle rolling, or everything you eat dies off. That doesn't sound that spiritual until you understand when God started making this thing in Genesis 1, the first thing He put in was light. Let there be light. But we know beyond the light, He also gave the oxygen. For the Spirit is the breath of God, and the Spirit was hovering, and when God spoke, the breath of God came, and God breathed into the nostrils of Adam, and he became a living being. So he had light and he had oxygen. But then he said this, he said, you cannot live in this garden without eating. You can eat all of this stuff, just don't eat this tree over here. So what God did is God established that the spiritual makeup of my life needs to eat. I'll just go ahead and say this in case you don't know it. Eating is spiritual. It's not physical. We have made it in America physical. It's a physical thing in America. I eat till I cannot walk. I eat until my legs go numb and I have to unbutton my pants. Hurt myself eating, so especially if there's a common pie in the room. Everybody in the room probably at one time has unbuttoned the top button to keep eating because your legs start going numb. And we don't eat for health, we eat for pleasure. Not all of us, but the majority of us in the room are pleasure eaters. It's driven by selfishness. I cannot eat that broccoli because it does not make me content. Yeah, you're sick because you're eating this way. But the reason, now watch, I'm just going to throw this to you. I don't mean it against anybody. I'm in the same boat you are. But a lot of the reason we're diseased today is not the devil. We're diseased today because of selfish behavior that will not exercise. It will not eat right. It just says, I want to sit at home, have a cigarette, pop a beer, eat what I want to eat, and then pray over it because that makes it spiritual. God bless this cigarette I'm about to have. I'm not against smoking. If you choose to smoke, go for it. Your body's a temple, but you'll pay the price the long haul. I'm not against a hamburger, but if that's all you eat, long haul, you're going to pay the price for it. Now, God made it this way. I'm going to go long today, so just hang with me. God made it this way. He made it to where you had to eat. So when we say fast, we're not just talking about quit milkshakes. Because you can go the rest of your life without a milkshake and still be selfish. When I say fast, I'm not just talking about bacon and hamburgers. Because you can cut out bacon and hamburgers and live the rest of your life. When I say fast, I'm not just talking about giving up carbs. You can give up carbs till Jesus comes. When I say fast, I'm talking about give up food. Because you only get a certain length of time before we're burying you in the ground. And it will cause selfishness to go on a hiatus of a field trip to wake you back up. He fasted, Nehemiah. Why? Because listen to this in Genesis 3. The serpent is talking to her in verse 5 and says, God knows your eyes will be open as soon as you eat it, and you'll be like God, knowing both good and evil. The woman was convinced. She saw that the tree was beautiful. That's the food. The fruit looked delicious. And she wanted the wisdom it would give her. She took it and she ate it and gave some to her husband who was with her too. And at that moment, verse 7, their eyes were opened and they began to feel shame and nakedness. And they sewed fig leaves together. I want to draw a connection for the next few minutes to this. Eating has a direct reflection upon relationships. When Eve ate in disobedience, it brought a destruction to the relationships. She lost the relationship she had with God, and it hindered the relationship we had with her husband. And then when she birthed out her first boy, it birthed out murder. Selfish behavior will always birth death. The first thing selfish behavior will birth is a death to the communion between you and God. God cannot work with selfish people. I wish He could, but He can't. God cannot make you stop being selfish. He can just come and ask, will you do this for me? It shows up all through the Bible. Noah did not have to build a boat, but he chose for the next 100 years to do it. He died to selfish living so you and I could be on the planet today. When we talk about Nehemiah's fast, we have to go back to the Garden of Eden and at least draw the parallel that eating does have a spiritual implication to it. When she ate of that fruit, this is Biology 101, she ate of the fruit and bit it and started chewing. That food went across her taste buds, and it has an instant, that tastes good. Emotion. In the taste area, it does nothing for life, but it does, I want you to understand this, the way God designed it is the first thing that it touches is the tongue, and the tongue is the rudder of your whole life. God designed it where food has to touch the tongue. And here's the thing, the rudder of your life has built in it, this is James 3, the rudder of your life is your tongue. Built in the rudder is our little things called taste buds, and they're both sweet and sour buds. And they can tell the sweet, and they can tell the sour. But when I eat and it travels over my tongue, it sends a signal to my brain, like it, don't like it. It's an immediate. Before it ever hits your stomach, and let the stomach determine it, whether it likes it or not. It's the tongue that determines like it, don't like it. Whether I'll ever eat it again or not eat it again. It was all based on what my tongue felt when it tasted it. God designed it this way because God, now when the Lord says things like this, oh, taste and see that I am good. When Jesus says, I am the bread of life and I am the water of life, Jesus was putting himself to the sustenance of all spirituality, food and water. I am your food and I am your water. In other words, if you drink of me, you will have everlasting life. It may not taste good at first, but if you will taste me, you will see that I am good. Watch, oh, taste and see that the Lord is good. Watch, it said, oh, taste first. And see comes after tasting. You have to taste and then let it sit for a while and go, oh, I see, that was good. It's no different than me tasting a pecan pie and going, ooh, that's good. But then I see later, it was not as good as I thought it was. Because now I got to go shopping to make it fit. So I just want to draw the parallel that eating is spiritual and it has spiritual implications. But in the American mentality, we've turned it into sensual rather than spiritual. Food has touched the sensual realm. And I need it, watch, I need to eat it to be content. Therefore, that's why the majority of struggle in a lot of our lives is really just connected to food. It's why the diet industry goes haywire, because they know we're driven toward it. They just play off of it, of your discontentment. Do you hate the way you look? And then they'll show you a picture of a fat lady here and a skinny lady here, and you get, oh, I want to look like that. No, you don't, because if you did, it takes a lot of pressure to get here. It's blood, sweat, tears, gym, eating a lot of broccoli to get there. It's just on TV, it plays to me emotionally. But I am convinced that God designed the breaking of selfish behavior to be connected to fasting, because food is such a source of contentment or discontentment. And it needs to happen in my life so that I can continue life. So when I place, this is what the word fasting means. It means to cover the mouth. For when you cover your mouth, you are making a statement that I will not be governed by my senses. I will not allow my sensual nature to govern me. And I will not allow my tongue to taste what's good, but I will allow my spirit to taste what is good. And it puts me into a realm of spiritual things. I'll just say this to you. Last year, I did a 21-day fast for my birthday. And everything I fasted for happened at the end of the year. There was not one thing I asked God to do off of that 21-day fast that when I hit December 31st, everything had been done. My wife did the same thing. She went on a fast at the beginning of last year and made a list of things that needed to get done. And she fasted, and every one of them got done. Supernaturally. Because the moment you stop breaking the nature of self and you begin to press toward heaven, you release the power of God. I believe this. I won't go here because time is catching me, but I do believe this. When Nehemiah mourned, wept, and fasted and prayed, he did more in 52 days than most people do in a lifetime. Fasting enhances the ability within which your life can get done, because it stops selfish behavior. Do you not think it very interesting that at the start of Jesus' ministry, we find the same four things? The will of a Father. He said, that's my food. Matthew 3, this is my son. He had the will of the Father, his food. He was led by the Spirit into the wilderness. That's the breath of God. So he had the breath. What is missing? Food and water. And for 40 days, Jesus fasted. And when Satan showed up, what was the first thing Satan tempted him with? Food. Why? It worked with Adam and Eve because food got them to miss the will of God. Therefore, I will come to Jesus and cause him to miss the will of God by simply touching the food. What he did not factor in is that Adam and Eve, to our knowledge, had never lived a fasted life. They had lived a contented life in the garden. But Jesus had come through the wilderness and had learned how to shut off the voice of discontentment so that he could understand it's not about me anymore. It's about the will of my Father. It's not about what I want. I want the piece of bread, but it's not about my will. And I learned in a place of fasting how not to reach out and let my contentment grab hold of the things that are not the will of God. And I'll just leave you with this thought. I think the reason most marriages today are hurting, why sex in most marriages today can be at an all-time low, why husbands and wives bicker and argue and sleep on a couch, and children today are mad at their parents, and relationships are stressed and strained, and you don't like where you work. It can be traced back to a root of selfish behavior. A root of selfish behavior. But fasting breaks it. Fasting breaks it. Listen to this last verse in Philippians chapter 3. Or Philippians chapter 2, Philippians 2. I want to read something and leave you with this. Verse 3. Philippians chapter 2, verse 3. Don't be selfish. Don't try to impress others. Be humble, thinking of others better than yourself. And don't look out only for your own interest, but take interest in others also. Listen. You must have the same attitude that Christ had. What was that attitude? He took interest in others. He broke selfishness. Though he was God, he did not think equality with God as something to cling to. Instead, he gave up divine privileges. That means Jesus could have come down here and just did what he did because he was God, but he gave that up. Why? He gave up his divine privileges because you mattered more than he mattered. I'm convinced that his fasting in the wilderness was to break that selfish nature of his flesh that didn't want to go to a cross for you. Listen to what it says. Instead, he gave up the divine privileges. He took a humble position of a slave and was born a human being. When he appeared in human form, he humbled himself in obedience to God and died a criminal's death on the cross. I guarantee you that day he didn't feel content. I guarantee you his flesh was screaming. Even the devil was screaming at him on the cross, save yourself. Save yourself. You can do anything, save yourself. And I'm sure the word self was a lot louder than the word save. He had at his disposal every angel of heaven to come get him off the cross that day. Self was probably screaming. We know it's true because he looked at his Father and said, why did you forsake me? But I love the way it ended. He said, into your hands I give myself, my spirit. Just commit my life.